I know you probably laugh at horoscopes because, well, I find them laughable too. But I do know that some of you still sneak a peek sometimes, don't you? Why do you think that is? When I was a kid, there was this little Chinese restaurant out on the highway. I forget the exact name of it. I think it was something like Yan's Kitchen, and it had a tiny little buffet with no more than 6 or 8 items. My dad liked to take us there because, number one, he really likes Chinese food. Number two, it was a really cheap way to feed a group of ravenous teenage boys. I don't remember what the prices were, but I think it was actually around $2 a head. And all of us boys could easily polish off 3 or 4 plates stacked so high they kind of looked like a pyramid. And of course, because I was maybe 14 or 15, I could eat all I wanted and stay as skinny as a rail. And that possibility, kids, if you're listening, trust me, disappears when you enter adulthood. Your body's going to demand that you keep on eating like that. You'll be used to those quantities. But what's going to happen is you're going to start putting on a new ring every year, kind of like a tree. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I used to be a number of belt sizes bigger than I am right now. But back to the Chinese restaurant, because like many places back in the good old days, they had these paper placemats with the Chinese zodiac. Along the top or sometimes around the edges, you could find the year of your birth and look up your Chinese sign, like this example that I found the other day. Of course, if you're listening on the radio, you're going to have to imagine me holding up a paper placemat. I'll make a little noise so you can hear it and enjoy the theater of the mind. So, according to this, I was born in 1969, and that would be the year of the rooster. Not the whole year, mind you, because the year in this Eastern zodiac actually begins in February. They don't always put that somewhere on the placemat, but if you're born in January, you probably want to back up a year. Not that it matters anyway, because I still don't believe in this stuff. But to the Chinese way of thinking, I'm a rooster. In the Western zodiac, apparently I'm a Scorpio. So now let's have a little fun and do a comparison. According to the placemat, I'm a hard worker. I am shrewd, I am decisive, and I often speak my mind. Because of these qualities, it tells me I will sometimes seem a little boastful. Well, my wife actually might be nodding her head in agreement right now because I'm Dutch, and if there's one thing we do, we speak decisively and quite bluntly. Travelers to the Netherlands often say they got their feelings hurt because we're so blunt. But from a Dutch perspective, it's a sign of respect. It means, well, we respect you enough to get right to the point. All right. The placemat also tells me I'm a dreamer and I'm extravagant. Now, the first part's probably true. I have a very vivid internal life, but extravagant? Well, let me remind you, Mr. Placemat, I'm Dutch, and our reputation isn't exactly, well, extravagant. Now, here comes the good part. It says, under this sign, you should be happy as a restaurant owner, publicist, soldier, or world traveler. So, let me give credit where credit is due. I've always thought I'd love to be a soldier, but I was born just kind of crippled up enough. I'd never get into the Army. World traveler? Okay, that part turned out to be true. So, this must be accurate, right? Well, no. Millions of people still read their horoscope every day, and some of them seem convinced that there must be something to it because it seems so right. But do yourself a favor. Read a few more of these paragraphs. I mean, the ones that don't correspond with your birthday, and see what you find. Let's just say, I'm not a rooster. I was born in the year of the dog. What does the placemat tell me? The dog will never let you down. Okay, that's true. I tend to value loyalty. It says, you are honest and faithful to those you love. Okay, that tends to be true too. You are plagued by constant worry. Yep, I am. You have a sharp tongue and a tendency to be a fault finder. Okay, that's true too. What they're describing, though, are human traits. These are things that all of us have. And as you're reading it, there's a part of you that kind of wants this to be true, especially the more flattering parts. And so you latch onto these very vague descriptions, and the more you think about them, the more you convince yourself that there must be some element to this universe that is predetermined who or what you are. I mean, just think about some of the horoscopes you've seen over the course of your life. You open the newspaper first thing in the morning, or at least that's how we used to do it, and there it is. Your job will be very interesting today, it says. So you wonder, what's going to happen? You go to work, and all day long you wait for it. And there it is, a surprise job site inspection, or a very obnoxious customer, or a patient who makes you laugh, or an assembly line that suddenly shuts down because of a malfunction. You think, aha, there it is, the interesting event that the universe promised to deliver. But I'd be far more impressed if the horoscope actually spelled it out in detail. Today at 11 a.m., you will encounter a strange individual wearing a long yellow coat, and he's going to ask you to help him do something very illegal at 11 a.m. sharp. But of course, this never works that way, does it? These are specifically written so that you will find a match for the prediction over the course of the next 24 hours. Now, you already know that, kind of, and you just read it for fun, right? But still, let's ask a curious question. What is it about this stuff we find so compelling? Why do we feel the need to take a peek? Why is it that even when we're laughing about it, there's a part of us that kind of wants it to be true? Is it because it's better than believing your life has no purpose? That we are the product of a mechanistic universe that just spit us out by accident? Even if you don't believe in God, why is it that you still seem to be incredibly attracted to the idea that the universe might have a mind of some kind, or there's something out there that affects your day-to-day existence? And just to be clear, I'm not actually talking about a philosophical concept known as determinism. And that's the idea that the course of your life is already completely written out in advance, baked into you the day you're born. Determinism suggests that all of our life actions are driven by outside causes. You will always be living a life that was predetermined by the long chain of events and conditions that came before your birth. It's a fatalistic worldview, one that robs you of the capacity to make any meaningful choices. And in some places, it's been a popular way to think about life because, as always, there's a tiny element of truth to it. Does your childhood environment determine who you'll be? Yeah, to an extent it does. Was my understanding of the world shaped by the World War II generation that brought me into this world? Yeah, sure, that goes without saying. The Bible says, train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now that is an encouragement to parents, reminding us that the influences we experience in childhood become a foundational part of who we are for the rest of our lives. So, if you train a kid correctly, even if they go completely squirrely for a little while, like most of us do, those baked-in principles will eventually become a powerful part of how and why you finally grow up and come around. But of course, the opposite is also true. If you grew up in a negative context, say an abusive home, that's going to profoundly affect how you react to everything for the rest of your life. Today, that's kind of the thinking behind the way we approach horrible, violent crimes. Let's say we discover the existence of a terrifying serial killer, like, say, the Toy Box Killer or John Wayne Gacy, somebody who does unspeakable things to their victims. These are the people who become the stuff of our very worst nightmares. Once we find them and put them away and recover the bodies of their victims, what is it that we usually do next? Well, actually, the break comes next, but right after that, we'll come back and talk about that.
Here at the Voice of Prophecy, we're committed to creating top-quality programming for the whole family, like our audio adventure series, Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy the faith-building stories from this small mountain summer camp and town. With 24 seasonal episodes every year and fresh content every week, there's always a new adventure just on the horizon.
When we discover the existence of a sociopathic killer, somebody with no conscience, pay attention to what we tend to do. We know there's got to be a reason this guy turned out so horribly. So we probe his past, we examine his childhood, we ask a really difficult question. What happened to this guy at home? Did his parents set the stage for this? What were the causes of this very disturbing behavior? See, we're convinced there's got to be something. But if we don't find something, that really bothers us. That's an outgrowth of determinism. We believe there's always got to be a reason for what happened. Now, I'm using an extreme example to make my point, but the point is that we appear to be wired to believe in cause and effect. Now, not every philosopher has always agreed with that. For example, David Hume, the famous skeptic, really struggled with the idea of cause and effect. But for the most part, most of us assume that's true. What's happening now was obviously caused by something in the past. Which brings me back to reading horoscopes. There's a part of us that wants to believe that our lives have some kind of order. There's got to be something guiding the whole process. There's got to be an explanation for who we are. And if that explanation isn't going to be God, there's a part of you that wants it to be something. And of course, when you bring God into the story, that opens up a whole new can of worms. Because throughout the history of Western thought, we've had lots of people assume that if God set the whole universe in motion and He ultimately guides the creation, that means that God determines absolutely everything that happens all along the way. It's a hardcore religious version of determinism that eliminates the concept or the possibility of free choice. If God is the author of life, some people say, then He's got to be the author of suffering. And some people have actually taken this thought all the way to its logical conclusion. God has even predetermined who gets saved and who gets sent to the fires of hell to flip and fry throughout the ceaseless ages of eternity. You don't have a say in the matter. I was actually raised in a religious tradition that taught that, even though I don't think I can think of one person I knew growing up who really was dedicated to that idea. You're probably aware of the shortest verse in the Bible from the Gospel of John. Jesus wept. It's found in the context of the death of Lazarus, who was a personal friend to Jesus. The story tells us that Jesus heard that Lazarus was ill, and then the next thing you know, Lazarus is dead. So now Jesus makes the trip to Bethany, and as he walks up to the house, Martha comes out and says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." In other words, Jesus, you could have done something to stop this, but you didn't. And that, of course, is one of the most painful questions that most of us wrestle with. All of us have something in the past, something incredibly painful that makes us question the goodness of God. If God is real, how could He let this happen? I see it on social media posts where somebody talks about a horrible tragedy or a sick child or a natural disaster, and they say, what kind of God would allow this? But let's think about that. Where was God is a slightly different question than how could God do this? How could God do this is a hardline deterministic question, as if God actually causes absolutely everything that happens. And it suggests that you and I are helpless puppets in some kind of sadistic theater. But the other question, why didn't God stop this, is a question that reveals an awful lot when you slow down long enough to really think about it. It suggests that maybe not everything is predetermined. There are choices. I think we ask those questions for the same reason we're tempted to peek at a horoscope. We're hoping that somebody or something is in charge of this place. We can't seem to shake the notion that there's got to be a reason that we're here. Even if you only believe in a cold materialistic universe, you still quietly hope that life doesn't mean nothing. The idea that everything's just chaos, that can lead to a very troubled life. And before we move on, let me just address that how could God do this question for just a moment. It's way too big of a question to answer quickly or easily. But let me read you something I've read on previous shows at least once, because I think it'll give you something to think about. This comes from a 19th century book that does an amazing job of thinking about the history of the world ever since the life of Christ. It's one of my favorites, because it's even brutally honest about the way that Christians behaved during the medieval period, essentially denying the principles of our own faith. The book admits, yes, we burned heretics, and yes, we treated other people in a way that would lead the world to think that maybe God doesn't exist. The number one group that discredits Christianity, the author points out, has been Christians themselves. But here's the specific part I want you to hear right now, because it's going to give you something to think about. Again, I have read this before, but this is so profound, I want to do it again. The author writes, "It is impossible to so explain the origin of sin as to give a reason for its existence. Yet enough may be understood concerning both the origin and the final disposition of sin to fully make manifest the justice and benevolence of God in all His dealings with evil. Nothing is more plainly taught in Scripture than that God was in no wise responsible for the entrance of sin, that there was no arbitrary withdrawal of divine grace, no deficiency in the divine government that gave occasion for the uprising of rebellion. Sin is an intruder, for whose presence no reason can be given. It is mysterious, unaccountable. To excuse it is to defend it. Could excuse for it be found, or cause be shown for its existence, it would cease to be sin. Our only definition of sin is that given in the Word of God. It is the transgression of the law. It is the outworking of a principle at war with the great law of love, which is the foundation of the divine government." Now, I know at first glance that kind of looks like a little dodge. When you don't understand something, just call it a mystery. But go ahead, take a few hours sometime to ponder that thought and see where it takes you. If you can actually explain evil, if you can find a really good reason for its existence, then maybe it's not evil. Maybe it's just determinism. Maybe we can't help it. Maybe if you work your way back through the long chain of cause and effect that brought you into this world, you can pin the blame on somebody else at the beginning of the story. Eventually, you're going to blame God Himself. If you can explain something scientifically, well, now you have proof there was no choice. That serial killer, no choice. The guy who robbed you, that's society's fault. Your decision to cheat on your spouse, well, of course that's your wife's fault, right? Of course, I'm not saying that other people didn't have a part to play in some of your bad decisions, but let's be honest, at the end of the day, who actually made all your choices? Some days we're so busy trying to figure out who else is to blame that we come to a point where we don't really believe in free choice anymore. We start to think in terms of hardcore determinism, and we're addicted to that because it takes the onus off of us. Meanwhile, the Bible reminds us the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? Now, right now, I want to be cautious about one important thing. A few moments ago, we were talking about those horrible moments when we want to know where God was when something awful happened to us. Some of you were really hurt as kids. Somebody took away your freedom to choose in the worst possible way. So just to be perfectly clear, I am not saying you are at fault for what happened. You're not. Somebody else did that. That person who hurt you, that was his or her decision. And they still need to own and live with their own wicked choices. All right, time for another quick break, and I'll be right back after this.
Dragons, beasts, cryptic statues. Bible prophecy can be incredibly vivid and confusing. If you've ever read Daniel or Revelation and come away scratching your head, you're not alone. Our free Focus on Prophecy guides are designed to help you unlock the mysteries of the Bible and deepen your understanding of God's plan for you and our world. Study online or request them by mail and start bringing prophecy into focus today.
Well, we've certainly wandered over a lot of wild country in just a few minutes, so let me get back to the Chinese zodiac. Why is it that even in this postmodern nihilistic world, we can't seem to shake the notion that there's got to be something out there driving the universe? It makes me think of Richard Dawkins' book on weaving the rainbow. Dawkins, of course, is one of my favorite whipping boys when it comes to notable atheists, and I'll admit, I am picking the low-hanging fruit. As smart as Dawkins is, and I have no doubt he's smarter than me, I still have to say he's a much better biologist than he is a philosopher or a theologian. I'm convinced that he felt he had to write this book because of his hardcore materialistic view of the universe. His philosophy basically strips life of any meaning And I think at some level Mr. Dawkins knows that. So what did he do? He wrote this book to appeal to our sense of wonder. He said, the universe makes you feel awe and wonder. But if there is no God, then why do you have a profound sense of awe and wonder? Why do I feel such a profound emotion when I look directly into the eye of a whale in the aquarium or the eye of an elephant in a game park? Why is it that right here in Colorado, when I take the back road to Estes Park and go over that final hill, my heart nearly stops when the majesty of Long's Peak suddenly rises from the horizon? And why does the night sky always dare me to believe that there's got to be something out there? It reminds me of something Paul said when he was standing on Mars Hill in the city of Athens. He was talking to a group of philosophers, a bunch of Epicureans and Stoics, and they became fascinated when he started to talk about Jesus. Now, just as a side note, if you're one of those skeptics who believes that the deity of Christ was invented at the Council of Nicaea, you'll notice that these philosophers in this story say he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. So much for the idea that the deity of Christ was invented some 300 years later. Now, if you've ever been to Athens, you'll know that Mars Hill is kind of unremarkable. It's just a big lump of rock, but it is in the shadow of the Acropolis and it overlooks the ancient Agora, the ruins of the city below. I don't know what I was expecting when I went there, but you know how it goes. You always build a place up in your imagination, and I guess I was expecting some kind of beautiful amphitheater. It's not. But on this lump of rock, Paul begins to talk about the unknown God, the one these philosophers figured might be out there, but they'd never been able to find him. So here's what Paul says. And he, that's God, made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. As even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. In other words, God has allowed all of us to go our own way because every detail of our existence is not predetermined. God values freedom of choice. After all, the Bible describes him as love, and love is not love if it doesn't involve choice. I know you're looking for something, Paul said to these philosophers, because you know the universe can't just be chaos. There's got to be something behind it. You'll notice that he said something similar to another group in the city of Lystra, over in modern-day Turkey. He said, in past generations he, that's God, allowed all the nations to walk in their own ways, yet he did not leave himself without witness. That, according to the Bible, is the reason for that sense of wonder that you have. It's the reason that so many people can't let go of the idea that there's got to be something in charge of this place. It's the reason so many people laugh at the horoscope in front of their friends, but then quietly hope there's something to it. And of course, I'm convinced it's the real reason that Mr. Dawkins had to write his book. He knows full well that a materialistic universe can be explained with scientific formulas, but it doesn't really explain humanity. Just listen to what he writes. He says, it is a central tenet of this book that science at its best should leave room for poetry. It should note helpful analogies and metaphors that stimulate the imagination, conjure in the mind images and illusions that go beyond the needs of straightforward understanding. But why, Mr. Dawkins? Why do you think we have that need for poetry? Why aren't we just happy with the cold, hard facts and the math? Why is it that your hardcore materialistic view failed to take deep root in the hearts of all humanity? I'll be right back after this.
Life can throw a lot at us. Sometimes we don't have all the answers. But that's where the Bible comes in. It's our guide to a more fulfilling life. Here at the Voice of Prophecy, we've created the Discover Bible Guides to be your guide to the Bible. They're designed to be simple, easy to use, and provide answers to many of life's toughest questions. And they're absolutely free. So jump online now or give us a call and start your journey of discovery.
All right, I guess it's time to wrap things up, and I know I probably raised more questions than I answered. I do that all the time. But honestly, that might be a good thing. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody else can do all your thinking for you, and all I really want to do is to have you honestly consider the claims of this book. I find it very interesting that about 20 years ago, all the famous apostles of atheism decided they didn't want to be identified with a negative term. After all, atheism is negative. It's a denial of God. They really wanted something more affirming. So some of them started calling themselves the Brights, as in everybody else is stupid and they're the only smart ones. And then some of them suggested that religious faith is a mental disorder, an abnormality of some kind. Of course, that does present a major problem because how do you account for the fact that the vast majority of human beings believe there's a God of some kind out there? Wouldn't that vast majority be the norm, the default mode for human existence? And wouldn't that tiny, tiny, tiny minority of atheists actually be the ones with an abnormality? It kind of makes you wonder. And of course, truth is never determined by majority vote anyway, because historically speaking, majorities have been wrong way too often. But it's still kind of interesting that such a tiny sliver of the population thinks everybody else is mentally ill for not agreeing with them. The outright denial of any kind of God proves to be a really tough sell in this world, and not just here in the West. And the reason it's hard to sell is because most of us have this nagging feeling that the universe can't possibly just be random chaos. There's got to be something to explain who we are and why we feel the way we do and why we experience the world the way we do. If this was all just a matter of biology, physics, or math, then why do we have music? Why the art? Why the poetry? And why that deep need to explain our existence? So yeah, I still think that knowing I was born in the year of the rooster is kind of entertaining, and when I'm in a place with the placemats, I can't help but look at it. Do I believe it? Not at all. But does it reveal something important about our condition? Sure. The Bible says that God did not leave Himself without witness, which means that He designed us to start looking for Him. And why does He make us go and look? Why not just break through the clouds and announce Himself? Well, let me put it like this. Would you rather be told you're going to marry someone, or would you rather have that person ask? Would you rather have someone look for you, pursue you, and win you? Who in the world do you think made you feel that way? Thanks for joining me today. I'm Shawn Boonstra, and this has been another week of trying to be authentic. Hey, thanks for watching Authentic. Would you be willing to do me a favor? Like, subscribe, and drop a comment. That really does help the algorithm put authentic in front of more people. And it's free. So go ahead, like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you.